So today I'll be talking to you guys about our 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. I'd like to talk about the biblical impact that was had on his life and how that really influenced his moral character. How I'll do that, I'll start off with his beginnings, growing up as a child to adulthood. Then I'll talk about some of the hardships that he endured through his presidential campaign, as well as just leading up to his presidency. And I'd like to conclude with his educational and biblical foundations, and really how that just enhanced his moral character. Before I get started into those things, I'd like to show a quick video.
Could switching to Geico really save you 15% or more on car insurance? Was Abe Lincoln honest?
Just stick my backside in my face.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
So I know that video has some humor to it. In no way, shape, or form am I trying to introduce Geico. But what I wanted to show there was one of his characteristics was his honesty. And one nickname that Abraham Lincoln had growing up was Honest Abe. And he encountered this nickname through his storekeeping, through his time as a storekeeper. What he would often do is he had transactions with people, and if he ever charged people by accident more than what he should have, or people ever left spare change behind as they were doing their business with him, he would literally close down the store, stop everything he was doing, and walk miles away from the store to return this change to those people. And so that's just one of the moral convictions he had, and this was founded in his in what he received in his education from the Holy Bible and that text that he had. And so I just wanted to draw from the moral convictions that he had growing up as a child and into his adulthood. Now I'd like to talk about his beginnings. Abraham Lincoln did have very humble beginnings. He was born in a log cabin in Hardin County, Kentucky, and his family did not come from wealth at all. His father was a man who really liked to work with his hands, and he believed in earning everything through manual labor. And so he was, I won't say he was poor, but he just had very humble beginnings. Also in his beginnings, he went to school in a small log cabin, and he only received about 18 months of schooling throughout days at a time or weeks at a time in his childhood. And so he really didn't have too much to come off of, but what we will later see is that Abraham Lincoln strived for excellence, and later he would go on to become a lawyer, and this was all things that he did with his education. But in his beginning, he and his family did have a family Bible, and also in his school, the main source of education, since they didn't have a lot of reading material, was the Holy Bible. And so all of these things and his characteristics really drew from principles and ideologies that the Bible was able to give him as a child. Now I'd like to talk about some of the hardships that Abraham Lincoln endured growing up. A lot of this had to do with deaths. He lost his little brother in infancy, Thomas, when Abraham Lincoln was 5 years old. When Abraham Lincoln was 9 years old, his birth mother passed, and that was very hard on him. Also in that situation, Abraham Lincoln and his father didn't always see eye to eye. As I said before, his father was a man who was all about manual labor and earning the hard dollar, whereas Abraham Lincoln was more concerned with education and furthering his education and doing things in politics, as we will later see. And so they didn't see eye to eye. So when his mother passed, that was very hard on him. Another situation that he endured was with his wife that he eventually married Todd. They initially had an engagement, but that engagement was broken off. And this was another time when Abraham Lincoln was kind of at a depressive state in his life. And in that time, he was actually given a Bible by a friend who was to help him, which the Bible was to help him just make it through the blues. And so we see at this time that as a child, Abraham Lincoln really read the Bible for its enjoyment and for storytelling. But as he progressed to an adult, he eventually was able to use the Bible, and really these are the moral convictions that he began to have in this time when he was developing as a man, and how he used the Bible to really give him the characteristics that he had, his honesty, his charisma, and just like I said, the moral convictions that he held to throughout his life was greatly influenced by the Bible. Next, I'd like to talk about some more about the Bible and its educational foundation. So as I said before, Abraham Lincoln's mother passed when he was 9 years old. His father did soon after marry another woman by the name of Sarah Johnston. And Sarah really encouraged Abraham Lincoln to further his education. And so in his schooling, he did have the biblical text, and he also further elaborated on his understanding of the Bible. And as we see later on in his life, many times in his speeches, even in his debates with other men going for government positions in that time, he would often use texts from the Bible for his arguments. At a time when the country was at a great conflict between slavery and you have the Union and the Confederacy, he brought up an idea about a house divided cannot stand. And that was a principle that he received from the Bible. And so, as you can see throughout the history of Abraham Lincoln, oftentimes he would draw from principalities and ideologies within the biblical text to help him. And this not only helped him and enhanced his character and his charisma and the way he was able to influence others, it also had a great influence on his life. I'd like to share a quote with you here, and this is by Abraham Lincoln. In regard to this great book, I have but to say, it is the best gift God has given to man. All the good the Savior gave to the world was commuted through this book. But for it, we would not know right from wrong. All things most desirable for man's welfare, here and after, are to be found portrayed in it. So Abraham Lincoln was very convicted by the ideologies of the Bible, and they really just, the character that you see him as and the influence that he had on the American people was greatly influenced by the biblical text. I'd also like to talk about how he used these things and how he was convicted by these things to present himself to people. If you look back in his speeches, the Gettysburg Address or the Emancipation Proclamation, there are ideologies and things from the Bible that helped Abraham Lincoln to be the man that he was. In conclusion, I like to just draw on the fact that what the Bible presented Abraham Lincoln with and how it really kept his character stable. He was never so brought down by his hardships that it ran him into the dirt. He was very successful as a lawyer, very successful as a politician, and very successful as our 16th president. But at the same time, he was not so proud or boastful that he was blinded by his own ambition. And this was all made possible, I believe, by his moral convictions of the Bible and how that served his character. Thank you.